right? Hi, this is Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reform, and we're talking about the elections tonight, November 2nd, 2010, and what our prospects are in the coming years. So, Grover, what do you see happening tonight and coming forward after that?
Well, it looks as though the Republicans will do very well in the House and strengthen in the Senate. The most important thing for limited government is for the Republicans to get control of the House, because then you can stop the bleeding. You can stop the damage. You can't reverse it, but you can stop bad things from happening in the future. And in the Senate, you pick up 5, 6, 7 plus Senate seats, then you can filibuster anything. Right now, with 41 seats, you can only filibuster if everybody, including the two ladies from Maine and the guy from Massachusetts, are all on board. And that's not all the key issues. That's many of them. It's not all of them. With 5, 6, 7 more Republicans, you can filibuster anything that threatens the growth of government. So what we get today is the ability to say no, to put our foot on the brakes. What we don't have is control of the rudder, and wouldn't until the presidency changes.
Okay. And your name, sir? You're from Cato Institute?
Yes, I'm David Boaz from Cato.
And, sir, what do you think we'll be able to do in terms of cutting off the money in the next 2 years?
Well, that's a good question. Grover was saying you can do these things. The question is, will the Republicans do it? They don't have a very good track record of that. So my first point would be a message to the Tea Party. You have to keep the pressure up after the election. The job didn't end on Election Day. The job started on Election Day. You've got to keep the pressure up because the special interest and the spending interest will all be there. So you have to keep that up. And then the House has to not appropriate more money than the government ought to be spending, and that'll be a challenge. But that's where they have to start.
Okay. And Grover, what do you think about the prospects in terms of elections in the coming years?
Well, if you look ahead in the House, two things will happen. However well the Republicans do tonight, because of redistricting, they'll be stronger by 10 or 15 House seats for the next decade. Because with governors and state legislatures in Republican control, the Republicans will control more districts in 2012, after redistricting, than they do now. So take however well the Republicans do today, add 10 or 15, that's the next decade absent swells back and forth. The sort of the Republican base will jump by 10 or 15 points. How many seats are your rock bottom control? So that's a helpful sign in the House side. On the Senate side, the next two cycles are difficult ones for the Democrats. There are about twice as many Democrats running for re-election in the Senate in 2012 and 2014 as there are Republicans. Again, the Democrats could have a good year, but they start with more at risk and they are in more vulnerable seats than the Republicans. The only Republicans you look at the next 2 years, lose two cycles possibly in trouble, are the two people from Maine and the guy from Massachusetts, whereas the Democrats have about 10 or 15 that are in districts that traditionally vote Republican at the presidential level, states that generally vote Republican at the presidential level. It's just tougher. It's not impossible. It's a tougher road for the Democrats in the Senate for the next two cycles. This cycle was supposed to be the tough one for Republicans. Obama made it easier.
Okay. And what do you feel about gerrymandering and how that might be resolved better for a better result for the American people rather than for the parties?
I'd like to see independent commissions in the states that do the districting rather than having politicians do it. But it's very difficult to get the politicians to agree to give up the power to do gerrymandering. And one of the problems with gerrymandering is it's a bipartisan thing. We hear a lot about who's going to control, but we also know that in the back room, the politicians get together and they carve up districts to help both incumbent Republicans and incumbent Democrats, and they don't want to give up that power. So in states with an initiative, you can go out and try to change it by initiative, but even with Arnold Schwarzenegger behind it, they couldn't make that happen. So that's going to be very difficult.
Okay, and Grover, what do you think about gerrymandering?
I think it's a travesty when the Democrats gerrymander states, and probably a good idea when the Republicans do. Look, there are real dangers when you do gerrymandering. The danger of the commissions is that they look like they're nonpartisan, but in Arizona, the fellow who created the nonpartisan rules after he passed the measure went on to become head of the Democratic Party, and he set it up in a way that's advantaged the D's each time. We have some problems when you hand it to the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court is not necessarily nonpartisan. So the effort to make it fairer, there might be some rules you could make, like you can't divide towns up. That just makes political gerrymandering, more difficult. It's tough. How do you take away the flexibility without handing the rigidity to somebody else? There's not an easy answer to that, but
Okay.
I'll live with the gerrymandering for the next 10 years, and then we'll solve it later.
So, well, thank you both for having a chat with Tea Party WDC, and you all have a wonderful night and enjoy the fruits of all of your labor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.